You're listening to the Life Purpose Advisor Podcast, episode 50.
You know, sometimes you have to slow down to catch up, and our lives move so quickly that that's indeed true. It's hard to grow if there's no room for it. It's hard to make change in your life if you don't make space for something new to come in.
You're listening to the Life Purpose Advisor Podcast.
Life purpose, spirituality, higher calling, personal growth, meaningful life.
We ask the deep questions about living a balanced life of meaning, purpose, and joy.
Passion, know thyself, be mindful, spiritual practice, aha moments, life lessons, balance.
It is time to welcome your host, Angie Swartz.
So today I want to switch things up a little bit. So I've invited my friend Michael Neeley to come on and interview me in honor of our 50th episode. So Michael, thank you so much for coming on to have a casual conversation and to put me in the hot seat today.
It's my pleasure, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Angie.
Oh, thank you so much. And I know that you'll have a lot of fun putting me in my own hot seat. I get feedback all the time that I ask my interviewees, yourself included, really deep questions, and that folks talk about things that they haven't ever talked about before in interviews. So that's the feedback that I've heard on the 50 interviews that I've done so far. So I thought I should be the person that answered some of these questions. And this idea was prompted a few interviews ago when I was interviewing. It started happening with a few people, but particularly when I was interviewing Susan Piver. And I asked her about her life purpose, and she said, well, what's your life purpose? And totally fair question, but I wasn't expecting her to ask me that. And I thought, well, I should be able to answer all these questions. So, and I think you've been interviewed on your show. Is that right?
I have, yes.
And how did that go?
It was very interesting having the tables turn. It felt a little awkward at first, and then you kind of get going in the flow, and then it's almost like, okay, I'm just like being on someone else's show. So it ended up being fine. Right.
So Michael Neeley is the host of Consciously Speaking, and you can listen to his show, which I mentioned earlier, on Consciously Speaking on iTunes and wherever you listen to podcasts. But you can also listen to my interview with him as well. So we have some rapport, and I asked Michael to join me today, and I couldn't feel more comfortable with you. And with that, I'll give this interview over to you, my friend.
Okay. I'm excited about this. So, Angie, you know, a lot of this, of course, came up in our conversation on my show, and being on your show, I love the way you shift the focus into life purpose. So I'm wondering for you, like you say yourself, what is your life purpose? What are you here to do?
You know, it's so funny. I interviewed someone yesterday, and I said, let's get right down to it. And I asked him that first question, which I don't usually do right off the bat. And he said, wow, you really are getting right to it first off. But for me, I think my life purpose, or I know that my life purpose is to live a fully expressed life of joy and happiness, and to really see the truth of others and to help them see that in themselves.
Mm. Well, and speaking of that then, because it's one of the things that you do so well as a life purpose advisor, how did you find it out for yourself? I mean, did you have someone you went to that helped you discover it, or were there events in your life that led you to finding it?
Oh, you know, there were so many signs along the way. I can't say that I was always listening to them. I'm classically trained. My background, I spent over 25 years in the corporate arena working for 5 very large companies. I have an MBA and a CPA license. So I was very much on the track to a thought that what I wanted to do with my life was to be a general manager of a medium-sized company, and I worked really hard at that. But there were signs through my whole life that I should be doing what I'm doing right now. And from anything from being the child who maybe from a pretty early age wanted to have a deeper conversation with their friends about what was going on with their parents or why they weren't getting along with their friends, to winning a speech contest in an early age, to being a writer. When I was in college, I worked in a job as what was then called a mentor in a summer training program for underprivileged youth, which was really, in essence, a coaching position to teach and help people see a bigger version of themselves and what was possible in their lives. So if I kept going on this, we'd spend all of our time talking about it, but there have been so many signs in my life that I didn't really acknowledge, I guess, or I just thought that was something that was part of me, but separate from our vocation. If I keep talking about this question, or thinking about this question, and bringing it more into the present, there were so many signs when I left my corporate job in 2003. And since then, it's been a very guided path to get me to doing life purpose work.
What would you say were some of the things that maybe stopped you from paying attention to those signs early on? Was there a fear around, like you mentioned that you weren't sure that this could be a career thing? Were there also elements like, well, yeah, I could do that, but, maybe I couldn't make as much money or I couldn't support myself? Were there other blocks that maybe kept you from making the leap earlier?
Absolutely. I mean, I think in my mind, I had this picture in my mind that because I went to graduate school to be an MBA, because I'd worked on this corporate path for so long, that was my life. That was the track that I was on. I was a very serious, very studious person in my career that, frankly, I could solve any problem that someone put in front of me, and I was entertained by that. But when it came down to thinking about joy, I don't know that I ever really asked myself those questions. I got joy out of time out of work and, career satisfaction in quotes when I was at the office. So, I don't know that I really sat down and thought about the fact that I was unhappy because I was on the fast track. Things were moving quicker. I was getting promoted, making more money, getting new and more exciting, so to speak, more exciting, challenging projects and new people to work with. So things were moving so quickly that I would work, crazy hours, 60 hours a week, and sometimes more than that, sometimes 7 days a week, and then take a big vacation and go to, great places in the world and say, oh, this is great. I'm in Italy this year. I'm in Australia this year. Better go back and work hard so I can go someplace glamorous next year. So I guess my life was very separate when I think about happiness and joy compared to work versus how I live my life today, which every day is happiness and joy. It's built around that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, Angie, because I believe that so many people in America separate the two. It's like work is work, and that's the hard part of my life, and then my life is separate, the time with family and friends and doing fun things. And they keep the two so separate that it really does get to the point where they either dread going to work or they just look at it like that's the necessary evil in order for me to enjoy my life. What moment was along your path, did you have this aha moment and go, wait a minute, it can be different and I want it to be different. Let's make a change.
I think there were a few things. When I was working in a corporate position in the telecommunications industry, I was married and my husband and I got pregnant. We weren't planning it. And so it was a big time for us to think about, we want to be parents, but we're not ready. We think we want to be ready in 10 years, which, I think at that time we were around age, we weren't young. We were probably 35, 36, something like that. And, but in our minds, it wasn't time to have children yet, which is kind of funny now in hindsight. But we were on a big roller coaster up and down, trying to accept the fact that something was happening in our life that we hadn't planned. And then we had a miscarriage. So, you're up on your emotions. You're shocked about a big change. Then you're happy. Then you're still shocked. And then you're happy. And then, oh, just kidding. This isn't happening. So that was the first thing I think that happened. And then a few years later, a bunch of people in my company were leaving and I was inheriting a lot of responsibility. My job was getting a lot bigger. And my job was actually too big for me to handle at that time. It was the job of 3 people, not 1 person. And the company was not looking to replace the people that had left. So I was kind of a crazy person, working crazy hours, coming home, eating dinner, working some more, going to sleep, waking up in the middle of the night, going, oh, I forgot to do that. I'll just get up and work for a little while, and, going back to sleep for a little while. But I took a business trip to Australia, and I was just away from my work long enough to get some rest. And I took a little time off after doing business and came back to my office, started sitting in meetings that I had sat in on the similar topics that we've been talking about for years. And I just kind of woke up and went, why am I working this hard when this seems like it's not really going anywhere? Meaning it's not meaningful anymore. And so at the time, my then husband said, you can quit. And it was just like a lightning bolt to me. I thought, I'm not a quitter. I don't quit things. Like, no, I can't. I've counseled people for years because I used to do a lot of mentoring and recruiting college students and up-and-coming professionals about career advancement. And I'd always told them, you never quit without another job. But luckily, at the time, we were in a financial position that I decided, after long nights of thinking, that I was going to take a sabbatical. And so that was really the big aha moment. I took a 3-month sabbatical and then went, well, that wasn't really long enough. I'm going to take some more time off. And then I got pregnant again. And so I always say that my daughter, now who's 10, was my biggest teacher, and she continues to be for many reasons. But that's the number one reason she's my biggest teacher, because I really didn't have a choice at that point in time but to change my ways of being a workaholic. Because there wasn't, in my mind, there wasn't a way to go back to working the crazy way that I worked in the corporate world and being a parent. And I wasn't willing to hire a nanny and let someone else raise my child. And it wasn't anything I ever thought about before. It wasn't anything I planned for, the family life part. But once my daughter came along, it was like a switch flipped, and I knew that my priorities were different. It was a very, very hard time being older, having a daughter. I had my daughter at age 38. And here I was, like, home with her I think I stayed home with her for 9 months or something like that without working, which, by the way, we're all lucky to still be alive after that time, because I'm not wired to be a stay-at-home mother. I'm not very good at sitting still. I thought that time period of raising an infant was way harder than running a global organization of over 100 people. It's just maybe different in personality, or, raising an infant is hard work, especially when you're older. You don't have any idea how much your life is going to change. So all of those things for me, long answer to your question, but all of those things were big aha moments that were pushing me in a direction that I was going to do something very different, and that I had to be very serious about what I loved.
Yeah. And once you got in alignment with that and really figured out your life purpose and started down that path, how has it affected your life in other areas and your work and even just your day-to-day?
Everything's different. My whole life is different. Going back to what we were just talking about related to joy and happiness, like I used to make my decisions in a completely different way. Now I make decisions based on what makes me happy, what makes my daughter happy, what brings joy into our lives, how can I help make others happy. So those things come first, and then the rest kind of flows together. Not that I'm not still a business person, not that I don't work to a strategy, but the work that I do with life purpose has an element of faith, a big element of faith in it, and some would even say that I feel that I work for God. So, and when you really believe that you're stepping into your faith, the question is, well, do you or don't you believe? So I think when you step up to a higher calling like this one, it forces you to really, really question how you're living your life, and are you serious about where you're going? So it's changed my life in so many ways, like from who I spend time to how I spend my time, to my commitment to my own personal growth, to how I spend money, to how I feel about money. So it's a very holistic change, I guess.
Yeah. I want to cue in a little more on your spiritual aspect of it. So I think one of the things that is a gift that you have is your intuitiveness. And I imagine that a lot of that comes from your faith and your spirituality. So could you share with the listeners a bit more, go into some depth about that, your religious beliefs, and what role you think that's playing in igniting you on your life purpose?
I'd be happy to. I'll go back to when I was younger. Like, I didn't grow up in a family that was deeply religious. My family was Baptist, and sometimes, folks went to church occasionally, but it wasn't something that I grew up with real strong in my life. I mean, people believed in God, but wasn't something that we did a lot as a family. And so my deep belief system has come into my life later in my lifetime, but it's so strong that it's undeniable. And when we were talking about aha moments, there's so many aha moments and things that have happened in my life, but a big thing that happened along my path to where I am today is meeting one of my great teachers, Alice Bandy. And Alice is many things, but she has a great interest in studying all things in religion, all things in psychology, all things from great historic teachers. And I've learned so much from her and the group that I joined of spiritual teachers, a training program that I've been in for, I think, about 5 years now. But the belief system behind, for me, is that there's one God, that regardless of whether you're Catholic or Christian or Jewish or whatever you are, that it's the same God there, just manifesting on earth in a different form. But, I interviewed Jeff Saltz yesterday, and he said something similar to this, which made me chuckle. But it's almost like, everybody, let's use something that's very current today. I'm not a big sports fan, but it's almost like everybody loves football, but some people like a different team. I almost think of religion as the same way, but it's much, much bigger than that. So, I believe that there's one God and life is designed to get continually better throughout our lives, and that we're here to have a fantastic experience on the earth, and that we're in charge of our lives, and whatever we choose to go after and that what our goals are those are the things that are going to show up in our lives. So if we choose or we feel that we're a victim, that's what's going to show up in our lives. If we choose that we're going to be a great consciously speaking advocate like you are, then great things are going to come for you, because that's where you're setting your intentions and you're spending your time on that. So it's only a matter of time before the things that you're seeking are going to show up for you. And it's true for everyone. The things that are important along that path are, we are all human, and things do come along for us that get in our way on our path. So we have to do the work. We have to clean up the things that cause us pain. We have to be present. We have to make sure we're not stuck in the past. Like, all of those things do trip us up and cause us problems with not being able to see the divinity of life. So, and that's why I do the work that I do, because it's so important and so joyful when somebody really gets that and can move forward. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then it actually leads me to another one, though. When you talk about staying on that path and, being focused on it, obviously there are distractions. Things come up in the day-to-day. What are the practices that you use to help you to stay centered and balanced and really on purpose?
Yeah. Well, just to comment on that, I think we all get what we maybe would say off the path a little bit. And maybe it's not really off the path. Maybe the path is just windy for a little while because you're supposed to go learn something else, or it feels like you're very much lost, but maybe you're not. Maybe you're having an experience that is purposeful for where you're going, but you just can't see why. But for me, the practices that are important to me are, and they've been different depending on where I'm at in my life and what's happening. For example, for years, years, when I was recovering from divorce, I was a big journaler. And I wrote all the time, every day, and sometimes more often than that. And now it's an occasional practice of mine. I know some people are big journalers their whole life, but for me, I like to look at practices as a toolkit that I'm versed in, that I can pull out when I need them. But right now, for me, the practices that are big are spending time in nature. I think I mentioned to you on our pre-call this afternoon, I'm headed out of town intentionally to go camping, to get away from technology and spend some, deep time with my daughter and friends. So spending time in nature, whether it's camping or hiking, or for me, water is big. So being around water is a spiritual practice. I'll oftentimes, there's a few lakes that are close to where I live, oftentimes go hike alone and spend some time meditating next to the water. Getting grounded in stones that are around is a really good thing for me. Hiking is also a practice, but I spend my practice every day is to get up, and I don't always do this first thing in the day, and I talk about that because I think sometimes people think about, when they think about practices, that it has to be a real rigid thing, because lots of people, I get up, the first thing I do is XYZ, and I don't start my day until whatever. But that's not really my personality. So my practice is that at some point in the morning every day, I do a sitting meditation where oftentimes there's prayer involved, and I do some energy work where I'm just clearing my own energy field, grounding my body, setting my intention for the day, and a few other techniques, which also turns into just a very mindful meditation. So that's my biggest practice. And then the other practice that is important to me is I work very hard on being mindful. And I think that there's a big definition of mindful in the world right now. But for me, being mindful is really noticing, taking the time to notice what's in front of me all the time. And I can't say that I do that all the time, but trying to be mindful to notice, what does it feel to be talking to you right now? How does it feel in my body? How do I feel about everything else I need to get done today? How can I be more present in each moment? If someone's talking to me, no matter how many things are on my schedule, how can I be there with them in every moment to the fullest degree that I can? So that's pretty big for me, and I work pretty hard on that.
Yeah. Some of the tools and practices that you've mentioned there, some of those come naturally for some of us, and others we need a little guidance and some work on. Are there particular tools that you use, like books that you've read, or, courses, or anything you would recommend for someone to maybe help them with getting more mindful or learning how to be, to meditate or be out in nature, or any of those aspects?
Oh, my goodness. I love tools. I often refer folks to spending time in nature. And I love Insight Timer, which is a tool for iPhone for meditation. It's a wonderful tool that even if you're not a meditator, it's a great thing to have like in your back pocket, that if you are in a really stressful situation, that there's something in there for everyone. I love Insight Timer. I also love podcasts. There's so many great podcasts out there, and there's something for everyone. As far as books go, so many great books in the world. I just recently interviewed Christina Baldwin, and her book, one of her books, The Seven Whispers, is one of my favorites that's out there. It's a little easy book to read, kind of like The Four Agreements from Don Miguel Ruiz, which is also a great little book. But, there are great books. Conversations with God is a great book that kind of blows your mind open about the possibilities of God. If you're someone that hasn't studied religion, or if your thoughts around religion are not strict, then you might enjoy reading that book. But I've read books from Marianne Williamson. There's some great books. Everyday Happiness is a wonderful book. To some of Deepak Chopra's books, and the list could go on and on and on. Two of my favorites are, I really love the connection between emotional wounds and physical symptoms. So I love You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay is a great book, and let's see, it's another great book by Carolyn Mace. which I'll think of the name of it in just a second. But another great book about the same thing. So many great books.
Oh, yeah. You've listed some of my all-time favorites and definitely books that I think should be in everybody's personal development library because I think they're wonderful.
That's another great thing, you asked earlier, how's my life changed? Like, I have so many books in boxes now that I think I could just donate because my library has filled up with all of these personal development and spiritual books. And not so long ago, somebody talked to me a little bit about, we're at the phase that we're at in our lives. And you and I think, might have even had a conversation about this once where we're entertained and interested in personal development tools like personality assessments and Tony Robbins and things that are really great for us. Strength Finder 2.0, which is oftentimes where I start with folks that come to me as coaching clients. But you get to some point in your life where you kind of cross over and you go, I'm ready for something that's on a different realm, that's a little bit deeper. And then you start devouring all these spiritual tools and spiritual books. And, for me, that was the Enneagram, and that was numerology and astrology and all those things that there's nothing wrong with either of those subsets of things, and I love both of them. But it is true that you do cross from one to the other. And I remember a day when years and years ago when I had bought The Power of Now, and I picked it up and I couldn't read it, and it just didn't make any sense to me. And I put it in my bookshelf, and maybe 10 years. I think that's been probably more like 15 years ago, and then years later I got it out and I couldn't stop reading it. So, we're ready when we're ready.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% there. I remember one of the books I was introduced, The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. I was introduced to that book and I just wasn't ready at the time. And then a couple years later, a friend gave me a call and says, hey, David Data is teaching a workshop for men. Would you be interested? And I'm like, I'm there. And since then, I've devoured every one of his books. But it is about timing, so I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that book, Anatomy of the Spirit is the name of the book by Carolyn Mace that I was not remembering a minute ago.
Yeah, great book. So, Angie, I'm curious, do you feel like your physical body plays any role in igniting your life purpose?
I do for sure. In the Life Purpose Advisor program that I wrote several years ago now, the third module is transforming the body. And I think part of that is realizing that the body is such an intelligent tool, and an intelligent being that's giving us messages all the time. And for you, for what you mentioned earlier, you mentioned intuition. And for me, I feel my intuition through my body. It's a very interesting new sensation that I think I've probably had all my life, but didn't really recognize what it was. And it's kind of like when you learn a new word, then you see it everywhere. When you have a new acknowledgement of something that's going on in your physical being, then it lights up. For folks that come into my office and we start looking at, one of the first things that I ask them in an intake session is, are you having any physical issues? Are you having any joint pain? Are you having any pains? How are you sleeping at night? Because all of those things are signs to emotional things that are also maybe bothering them or going on in their lives. So as we were talking earlier on the path to stepping up to our purpose, there are things, blocks, emotional baggage, emotional mud, I sometimes call it, that's in the way. And this is true for me too. If something's going on in my body, it's a signal to stop and say, okay, what's the message here and what do I need to stop and take care of? Because just because you've elevated your consciousness a little bit doesn't mean you're ever done. But I think all those things are signs for us, and our body is helping us to grow all the time. So, for example, if we're having, let's think of a good one, if we're having heart problems, so to speak, let's say we're having discomfort in our chest, then there's a really good chance that we're really angry about something that we're not working out. And I like to look at all those things and clear them.
Yeah. I love that. You know, Angie, we alluded to it a little bit earlier in the interview, and that is that often we shy away from doing what we think is our life purpose and doing something that we know that we absolutely love because we don't necessarily believe that we could make a living at it and be successful at it in that way. So I'm wondering for yourself, do you now make more money or less money since aligning with your life purpose? And how have your values changed around that?
I make a lot less money. When I used to be a crazy workaholic, I made lots and lots of money, and I was fortunate to be in, during the crazy stock market years, fortunate to be in times where money was flowing easily. And I talked to a lot of people about this topic. I think we all have some lessons to learn in our lives around prosperity. And when you choose that you want to go deeper, maybe part of that lesson is to really evaluate what's important in your life. So for me, I do make less money, but I can't say that I can't say that I'm less happy. You know, I think I'm probably happier and more joyful, and I have everything I need, and I have all the faith that I'm going to have everything I need. And I should caveat that statement by saying I haven't always felt that way. Like I had to work really hard, and there have been times when I've been scared about that or worried a little bit about, because we all start, I've coached people that are changing their lives, and our first instinct is to go, all right, well, I make $150,000 now. I'm going to become a coach, so that means I've got to see 50 clients a month, and I'm going to start that next month. That's a logical, linear way to think about it, but not often how it works in actuality. So it's a very interesting transformation that we go through, I think, when we're going from one part of our lives to another. And I feel that prosperity has a wider definition than I ever knew possible before. So it's not just about money, but it's about many, many things. So that's kind of a rambling answer to your question.
No, I totally get it. And one thing that came to my mind as you were saying that, Angie, is that, you know, the bean counters in a company, in a corporation, look at the cost of an employee based on what it costs us for a salary, what it costs for his health insurance, what it costs if we provide a company car, and the training expense of that employee. And they use all of those calculations to figure out what is the total cost of an employee. And I like to think of it on the reverse side. What is your total earning from you making money in the corporate world? What are your total earnings? And for me, the take home is, okay, well, yes, I get so much money, but how much free time do I get? How much time do I still get to spend with my family? How much flexibility do I have? All those other elements that really play into our quality of life. And so while, yes, your bottom line dollar might be less, I believe, and at least from your answer, it sounds like your quality of life has gone up considerably.
Absolutely. No question.
Yeah, I think that's the most important factor there. So I love it. I want to move into our lightning round now. And so do you think passion and purpose are the same things?
I don't.
Okay. Do you think everyone has a life purpose?
Yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how important is following your joy in igniting your life purpose?
Oh, about 160.
Okay. Did you ever quit a job to follow your purpose? And do you think someone needs to quit?
Well, I did quit my job, but I didn't know I was quitting it to follow my purpose. I think I was, but I didn't do it intentionally at that point in time. And I did leave. I used to own before doing Life Purpose Advisor, I owned a little boutique social media marketing agency. So I did leave that because I knew I had to do this work. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew it was a big heart calling. And I don't think someone needs to quit their job. I do think there comes a time maybe when it's time to move on, but I think it's on a case-by-case basis.
Makes sense. What brings you great, great joy?
So many things. So many things. Spending time with my daughter, really connecting with something bigger than myself, like having a connection with the divine, growing personally, learning something new, a really great movie. So many things to have joy from. It's just delicious. Life is so delicious.
It really is. So if you unexpectedly amassed a good-sized fortune, aside from giving part of it to me, what would you do differently?
Of course I'd give some to you. I'd give some to a lot of places. I would form a nonprofit. There's not too many things that I would do different in my personal life. I might travel a little bit more, but if I had lots and lots of money, I would form a nonprofit and train more people to help people understand how to step up to their purpose and clear the things that are in the way to getting there. I would buy a retreat center on a lake in some place that's not as hot as Southern California. And I would get a driver and a personal chef.
Ooh, nice. Well, here's wishing you a good-sized fortune. I hope you get that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Angie, what's the biggest thing our listeners could learn from your life?
You know, I ask people this question all the time, and 50 times now, and I never realized how hard it is to answer until I thought about it for myself. So I want to acknowledge I had to give it a little bit of thought. People answer it easily, but I don't think it's that easy. But I think that from my life, the thing to be learned is that life is to be lived and deeply experienced, and that we can be and do anything that we want. And that happiness and deep joy are there just waiting for us if we commit to what it is that we want and we do the work to get there and we invite the divine in to help us.
Very insightful. Thank you for that. You know, obviously we all are seeking. I mean, I think anybody who's listening to your show, just like folks who listen to my show, they're looking for something more. They know there's something more out there. So what would your recommendations be for these listeners who are seeking personal growth? What would be a good resource? Or for mindful spiritual practice, any resources you could recommend?
Well, I think there's so many things out there, and it really depends on where somebody's at. But I would grab a book, find a mentor. Of course, there are a lot of great podcasts out there that are free. And what I love about the podcasting industry, as you can see from Michael and my discussion today, is there's great collaboration in this industry. So there's so many people out there that are just there to help you or give you advice. But I would start, writing down your feelings a little bit. You don't have to. Journaling is sometimes too intimidating for someone, but, start jotting down a few things a day, read a good book, reach out to me or to Michael and say, hey, I hear what you say about reading a book, but those books you recommended don't really fit me. What's something easier to start with? Reach out and ask. I'm sure we'd both be happy to answer that question. And slow down. A great quote that my minister, Wendy Craig Purcell, has said, and I've heard others say it too, is, sometimes you have to slow down to catch up. And our lives move so quickly that that's indeed true. It's hard to grow if there's no room for it. It's hard to make change in your life if you don't make space for something new to come in. So just slow your life down a little bit.
More great advice. I'm loving it. So what's the best way for people to connect with you? So speaking of that then.
Well, they can find me here on the Life Purpose Advisor podcast, of course, but at lifepurposeadvisor.com. You can send me a note there. You can find me on most social media outlets and send me a note or leave a comment. You can email me at Angie@lifepurposeadvisor.com, or you can give me a call at 513-279-2789.
Excellent. And finally, Angie, are there any offers that you'd like to make to the listeners? Any special deals you got going on, something you want to share?
We always have a free self-study on the lifepurposeadvisor.com. It's on the front page. It's a pretty deep self-study, and it's not going to be free for too much longer. I'm right in the middle of turning it into a paid product, which has been the plan since I put it out there. But It's a pretty good program to just get you started on thinking about these thoughts. So it's on the front page, lifepurposeadvisor.com, and you can just sign up there and you'll get a free lesson for 7 lessons will come to you in your email, and you can do them whenever you're ready.
Excellent. Angie, I want to toss just something a little bit extra piece out there that's not part of the show per se, but I just have to tell your listeners that I met you first virtually and had you on my show, and then we met face-to-face at Podcast Movement, and we've had conversations since then and became closer friends, and your intuition in coaching me has been phenomenal, and I love how, even for myself as a coach, and part of why I want to say this is because I imagine some coaches also listen to your show, as do mine, that even coaches need coaches. And I think you're phenomenal, and I love the assistance and support that you've given me, and thank you so much for that. And thank you for being a guest today on your show.
I'm very humbled by your statement. Thank you for saying such a nice thing. I appreciate your time very much, and it's my pleasure, Michael, to get to know you better and to hold space for you to do the great work that you're here to do. We're very lucky to be partners on this path to helping people wake up and live more conscious lives, and how lucky are we?
Yeah, completely. Thank you.
So, is there, before we close, I know this is about me today, but is there anything that you wanted to say about yourself?
No, just that I'm really happy to be here, and, hey, listen to me interview her with a different set of questions on my show if you get a chance, and check it out. But, man, I just love what you're up to, Angie, and I love your show.
Thanks so much. All right. You've been listening to Michael Neeley interview me, Angie Swartz, on the Life Purpose Advisor podcast. We thank you for listening. If you'd like to find your life purpose, more information about that, you can come talk to me at lifepurposeadvisor.com, and we'll see you next time.